I am Joshua, 24 years old, and my entire family threw a massive graduation party for my older brother, Samuel, and completely intentionally forgot to invite me. Before I tell you about the absolute media storm that exposed their lies to our entire town, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. It was a Tuesday evening, and my apartment was so quiet it felt like a funeral. I had just finished a brutal 10-hour shift at the engineering firm where I worked as a junior analyst. My eyes were burning from staring at CAD models and financial spreadsheets all day. I dropped my keys on the counter, grabbed a cold bottle of water from the fridge, and collapsed onto my cheap gray sofa. I pulled out my phone, expecting the usual boring updates, and opened Instagram. The very first picture on my feed felt like a physical punch to the gut. It was posted by my cousin, Matthew. The photo showed my parents' sprawling backyard, completely transformed. There were elegant string lights woven through the oak trees, a massive catered buffet table, and a huge, professionally printed banner hanging across the deck that read, "Congratulations, Samuel and Emily. The future belongs to you." Underneath the banner stood my older brother, Samuel, and his girlfriend, Emily. They were both holding up their bachelor's degrees, beaming at the camera. Flanking them were my parents. My mother, Eleanor, was wearing her expensive pearl necklace and a smile so wide it looked like her face might split. My father, Robert, had his arm proudly slung over Samuel's shoulder. Surrounding them were aunts, uncles, family friends, and neighbors. The caption read, "So incredibly proud of these two. What an amazing graduation party. The whole family is here to celebrate. The whole family. Except me." I zoomed in on the photo. I saw my Aunt Sarah laughing in the background. I saw Uncle David holding a plastic cup. I looked at the timestamp. The party had been on Saturday, 3 days ago. For 3 days, I had gone about my life, calling my mom on Sunday for our usual brief chat, and she hadn't breathed a single word about it. I lived exactly 40 minutes away. I wasn't across the country. I wasn't unreachable. I just wasn't wanted. My chest tightened. The air in my living room suddenly felt incredibly thin. I scrolled through the comments, reading the endless stream of congratulations from relatives I hadn't seen since the holidays. Not one person had asked where I was. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the cold, hard reality wash over me. I navigated to my contacts and pressed my mother's name. It rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hi, Joshua. How are you, honey?" Her voice was bright, cheerful, and entirely too loud. It was her performance voice. The tone she used when she knew she was guilty of something but was going to aggressively pretend everything was perfectly fine. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, keeping my voice completely level. I was just scrolling through Instagram. I saw Matthew's pictures from the backyard. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing change. The cheerful facade cracked instantly. When she finally spoke, she sighed, a heavy, long-suffering sound, as if I was a toddler who had just asked a completely unreasonable question. "Oh, you saw those," she said flatly. "Yeah, I saw them. A graduation party for Samuel and Emily, with the whole family. Did my invitation get lost in the mail?" I asked. I wasn't even yelling. I was just asking for the truth. "Joshua, please don't start this right now. Don't make a big deal out of nothing," she snapped, her voice dropping into that tight, defensive register I knew so well. "A big deal out of nothing? You threw a massive party for my brother, invited everyone we know, and didn't even tell me it was happening. Why? Because we didn't want you stealing his moment," she blurted out. I froze. Stealing his moment? How would my standing in the backyard eating potato salad steal his moment? "You know exactly how you are," she fired back, fully committing to the attack now. "You always find a way to make things about yourself. You have this need for attention. Samuel worked very hard for his business degree. Emily worked hard. This day needed to be entirely about your brother and his girlfriend, not about you. We just wanted one day where Samuel could shine without you trying to cast a shadow over him. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My mother was actually trying to convince me that my mere presence was a threat to my brother's happiness. "I see," I said softly. The anger was gone, replaced by a freezing, absolute clarity. "I'm glad you understand," she said, her tone softening, mistaking my calmness for submission. "We can get dinner next week, just the three of us. You, me, and your dad." "Don't bother," I replied. "I completely understand your logic, Mom. It makes perfect sense. So, with that in mind, please don't expect an invitation to my graduation." My mother actually laughed. A short, sharp, mocking sound. "Oh, Joshua, please. You've been talking about this mysterious master's degree program for 2 years now. You're working a full-time job. We all know you're not going to finish it anytime soon. I am not holding my breath for any invitation. Goodbye, Mom," I said, and ended the call. I tossed the phone onto the cushion next to me. The silence of the apartment returned, but it didn't feel like a funeral anymore. It felt like a starting line. I stood up, walked over to the desk tucked into the corner of my living room, and looked at the large paper calendar pinned to the wall. I took a red marker and drew a thick, heavy circle around a date exactly 3 weeks from today. Little did my mother know I wasn't just talking about a degree. I was 3 weeks away from defending my thesis for a highly competitive dual master's program in engineering and business administration. I had been grinding away in absolute silence, and the game was just about to change. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the room. It was 2 a.m. The rhythmic clacking of my keyboard sounded like a machine gun in the quiet night. I was putting the final formatting touches on my thesis. 250 pages of original research on optimizing supply chain logistics using predictive AI models. It was the culmination of 2 years of sacrificing my weekends, my evenings, and my sleep. I rubbed my tired eyes, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and stared at the title page. Joshua Carter. No one in my family had ever seen this document. No one knew the topic. No one knew the sleepless nights. And that was exactly how I had designed it. I had learned the hard way that sharing my ambitions with my family was like handing them ammunition. My mind drifted back to the day I got accepted into the dual degree program. I had been so excited. I drove over to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, the acceptance letter folded in my pocket. We were sitting around the dining table. Samuel was talking about a new fraternity party he was organizing. When there was a lull in the conversation, I pulled out the letter. "Hey, I actually have some good news. I got accepted into the dual master's program at the state university. Engineering and business." My father, Robert, paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, then at the letter and let out a scoff. "A master's? Why on earth do you want to stay in school? You already have a bachelor's. You're just wasting money on degrees nobody cares about. We already drained the college fund for you and your brother. If you think I'm paying a dime for this..." "I'm paying for it myself, Dad," I had interrupted quickly. "I'm keeping my job. I'll do it in the evenings." "Suit yourself," he muttered, returning to his steak. "But don't come crying to me when you're burned out and broke. Real life is about making money, Joshua, not reading textbooks." Samuel had smirked from across the table. "Yeah, bro, keep hiding in the library. Leave the real world to us." That was the last time I mentioned my tuition or my classes to my father. But it wasn't just the academics. It was everything. A year into the program, I was grinding so hard at the engineering firm that my boss noticed. They offered me a promotion to junior analyst, a role that usually required 3 years of experience. I got it in 1. I made the mistake of mentioning the promotion to my mother over the phone. "Oh, a promotion? That's nice, honey," Eleanor had said. Her voice lacked any real warmth. Though Susan at the country club was just telling me how companies these days are desperate to fill their diversity and inclusion quotas. They just promote young people to make the company look modern. But still, good for you for being in the right place at the right time. She had managed to take my 80-hour work weeks and attribute my success to a corporate quota. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive destruction. I had gripped the phone, swallowing the lump of anger in my throat, and just said, "Yeah, Mom, thanks." The final nail in the coffin of my openness had happened just last Christmas. The whole family was gathered in the living room. Uncle David, who had always been a bit more observant than the rest, sat down next to me on the couch. He was holding a glass of bourbon and looked at me intently. "So, Joshua," Uncle David asked loud enough for the room to hear, "you've been awfully quiet lately. What are you doing with your life these days? How's the job?" Before I could even open my mouth to answer, Samuel jumped in from across the room. "Oh, you know Joshua, Uncle David," Samuel laughed, pointing a half-eaten sugar cookie at me. "He's just busy trying to be the smartest guy in the room. He's working some entry-level desk job and pretending he's the next Elon Musk. He's got this weird obsession with trying to prove he's better than everyone else." I looked at my mother, expecting her to scold Samuel. Instead, she was nodding slightly. "Joshua does have a habit of taking things a bit too seriously," she agreed softly to Aunt Sarah, who was sitting next to her. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just looked down at my hands and let the conversation move on without me. I realized then that they had built a narrative about who I was, the arrogant, attention-seeking lesser brother, and no facts or achievements would ever change their minds. They needed me to be the failure so Samuel could be the star. I shook my head, pulling myself out of the memories. The glow of the laptop screen brought me back to the present. I hit save on the document and closed the lid. The graduation party for Samuel had just been the loudest confirmation of what I had known for years. I was entirely alone in this family, but I wasn't going to let them take this achievement from me. I needed to celebrate. I needed to mark this milestone. But I refused to do it in a massive auditorium full of strangers, and I absolutely refused to invite the people who had spent my entire life minimizing my existence. I picked up my phone. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. I found Matthew's name and hit dial. Matthew was my cousin, Aunt Sarah's son. We had been incredibly close as kids, building forts in the woods and playing video games until dawn. We had drifted a bit during college, but whenever we saw each other, the old bond was instantly there. He was one of the few people in the family who didn't look at me through my parents' distorted lens. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey man, you're up late. Everything okay?" "Hey Matt." "Yeah, everything is fine," I said, my voice steady. "Listen, I need to ask you a massive favor, but it has to stay completely between us. Robert, Eleanor, and Samuel cannot know about this." "Okay," Matthew said, his tone instantly shifting from casual to serious. "You know I've got your back. What do you need?" "I'm defending my master's thesis in a few weeks. I'm graduating," I told him, "and I want to throw a party. But I need your help to organize it, and I need you to help me make sure the right people are there, and the wrong people aren't." There was a brief pause on the line. Then Matthew said exactly what I needed to hear. "Say less. Let's meet for coffee tomorrow. We have work to do." The Bellwood Cafe smelled intensely of roasted espresso beans and rainy Tuesday mornings. I sat at a small corner table, nursing a black coffee, watching the door. Matthew walked in precisely at 10 a.m., shaking the light drizzle off his jacket. He spotted me, gave a quick wave, and slid into the wooden booth opposite me. "All right," Matthew said, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the table. "Talk to me. You sounded intense on the phone last night. Master's degree? Man, I didn't even know you were still in school. That's huge." I offered a small, tight smile. "Thanks. Dual masters, actually. Engineering and business. I defend the thesis in 2.5 weeks." Matthew whistled low. "Dude, that is insane. Why have you kept this a secret? Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Robert should be screaming this from the rooftops." I stared into my black coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl. "They don't care, Matt. And they weren't exactly busy planning a parade for me. Did you notice who wasn't in any of the photos you posted from Samuel's party?" Matthew's face fell. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "Wait, you weren't there. I honestly thought you had to work. Or you were traveling for the firm. He looked genuinely horrified. Josh, I am so sorry for posting those. I had no idea you weren't invited. Don't apologize for posting them, I said firmly. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have even known it happened. I called my mom about it. She explicitly told me I wasn't invited because they didn't want me stealing Samuel's moment. Matthew's jaw dropped. She actually said those exact words? Word for word. Matthew reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumbs flew rapidly across the screen. His expression darkened, his brow furrowing in deep anger. He spun the phone around and pushed it across the table toward me. You need to read this, he said, his voice hard. This is the family group chat, the one you're not in. I looked down at the screen. It was a message sent by my mother, Eleanor, dated 4 days before Samuel's party. Eleanor, hi everyone. Just a quick note regarding the party this weekend. Joshua will not be joining us. He is extremely stressed and busy with his job right now and specifically asked for space. Please do not call or text him this weekend, as he really needs quiet time to focus and doesn't want to be disturbed. Let's all focus on celebrating Samuel. I read the words 3 times. A cold, heavy sensation settled in my stomach. She hadn't just forgotten to invite me. She hadn't just made a passive decision to exclude me. She had actively orchestrated my isolation. She had lied to our entire extended family to ensure that not a single person would accidentally ruin her perfect lie by reaching out to me. It was calculated, malicious sabotage. I pushed the phone back to Matthew. My hands were shaking slightly, not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated rage. She lied. I whispered. She manipulated all of us? Matthew corrected, his voice laced with disgust. I am so incredibly angry right now, Josh. Tell me what we're doing. Because we are going to throw you the best damn party this town has ever seen. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the strategy. Matthew, who worked in event planning, knew all the venues in town. He took charge of logistics. We drafted a guest list. It wasn't about family duty. It was about genuine connection. We listed the aunts, uncles, and cousins who had actually checked in on me over the years. We added my friends from undergrad, my supportive colleagues from the firm, and my academic advisors. It was a curated list of people who didn't view me as a competition or a disappointment. The next 2.5 weeks were a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion. I worked my day job, finalized party details with Matthew at night, and rehearsed my thesis defense until my throat was raw. I existed on black coffee and sheer spite. Then came the Wednesday of my defense. I stood in a small, wood-paneled conference room on the university campus. I was wearing my best charcoal suit. Across the long oak table sat my thesis committee, 3 highly respected professors in the fields of engineering and economics. Dr. Harrison, my primary advisor, sat in the center. He was a notoriously tough critic with a reputation for tearing weak arguments to shreds. I connected my laptop to the projector. The title slide appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath, pushing every thought of my mother, my father, and Samuel out of my mind. This was my arena. Good afternoon, committee members. I began, my voice clear and steady. Today, I will demonstrate how the integration of localized AI predictive modeling can reduce supply chain friction by up to 22% in mid-sized manufacturing firms. For the next 45 minutes, I didn't stumble once. I presented the data, the algorithms, the economic impact analyses. When I finished the formal presentation, the questioning began. They didn't go easy on me. They grilled me on the methodology, pushed back on the economic variables, and challenged the scalability of my models. But I had lived and breathed this data for 2 years. I answered every question with precision, citing literature and pointing to specific datasets in my appendices. When the barrage of questions finally stopped, Dr. Harrison took off his reading glasses and placed them on the table. The room was utterly silent. Mr. Carter, Dr. Harrison said, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. If you could step outside for a few moments so the committee can deliberate. I walked out into the empty hallway. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind me. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. 10 minutes passed. Felt like 10 hours. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Harrison gestured for me to come back inside. I stood before the table. Dr. Harrison looked at his colleagues, then back at me. A rare, genuine smile broke across his usually stern face. "Joshua," he said warmly, "congratulations. You have passed your defense with flying colors. Not only that, but the committee is in unanimous agreement that this is one of the most robust, innovative, and commercially viable pieces of graduate research we have seen in the last decade." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Thank you all." As I was packing up my laptop, Dr. Harrison approached me. He lowered his voice. "Joshua, I want to talk to you next week. I have some contacts at the local business journal. They cover emerging tech and local industry innovations. I want to pitch your research to them for a feature article. The public needs to see this. The industry needs to see this." I zipped my laptop bag, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I would be honored, Dr. Harrison. Truly." I walked out of the building into the late afternoon sun. The storm hadn't just begun. I was currently riding the lightning. The silence from my parents' house was deafening. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the phone call with my mother, and my phone hadn't registered a single text or missed call from Eleanor, Robert, or Samuel. They had successfully discarded me to focus entirely on Samuel's post-graduation life, and they were perfectly content living in a reality where I simply didn't exist. It was exactly what I wanted. The quiet allowed Matthew and me to work completely under the radar. Matthew had outdone himself. He managed to secure a beautiful, exposed brick event space downtown, right above a popular artisan bakery. It had massive industrial windows overlooking the city, polished hardwood floors, and enough space to comfortably hold 50 people. It wasn't the sprawling, ostentatious backyard barbecue my parents threw. It was intimate, sophisticated, and entirely mine. We were reviewing the catering menu in my apartment on a Thursday night, just 2 days before the party, when my phone buzzed violently on the coffee table. The caller ID flashed a name that made my blood run cold. Grandma Margaret. Margaret was my father's mother. She was a formidable, sharp-tongued woman who lived 3 states away. She was the matriarch of the family, known for her brutal honesty and her absolute intolerance for foolishness. She scared my father, and she absolutely terrified my mother. I looked at Matthew wide-eyed. "It's my grandmother." Matthew winced. "Don't answer it. If she knows, the gig is up. If I don't answer, she'll just keep calling," I said, swiping the green button and putting it on speakerphone. "Hi, Grandma. Joshua David Carter." Her voice snapped through the speaker, sharp as a whip. There was no polite greeting. "I have just spent the last 20 minutes on the phone with your Aunt Sarah. I demanded to know why she sounded so guilty when I asked about you. Care to explain why I am just now finding out that you were deliberately excluded from your own brother's graduation party?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Grandma, it's fine. Really. Mom said they didn't want me stealing Samuel's moment." Stealing his moment? What utter garbage. Grandma Margaret practically roared. "That woman has been coddling Samuel since the day he was born and treating you like an afterthought. I knew Robert was blind to it, but I didn't think Eleanor had the audacity to lie to the entire family. Joshua is too stressed. She texted me. She lied to my face, Joshua." "I know, Grandma." Matthew showed me the text. The line went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had lost the sharp edge of anger and was replaced by a thick, wet emotion that shocked me. Grandma Margaret was crying. "Oh, my sweet boy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am so deeply sorry. I should have known. I should have checked on you myself. You must have felt so incredibly alone." I felt a sudden lump form in my own throat. The walls I had built up to protect myself from my parents were useless against genuine empathy. "It's okay, Grandma. I'm okay. Actually, I'm more than okay." I looked at Matthew, who nodded encouragingly. "Grandma, I didn't tell anyone this because I didn't want the drama, but I just successfully defended my master's thesis. 2 degrees, engineering and business. I graduated. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Joshua, that is incredible. My brilliant grandson. Why didn't you tell your parents? Because Dad would tell me I wasted my time, and Mom would say I only passed because of a grading curve, I said bluntly. Look, Matthew and I are organizing a private celebration this Saturday, just for the people who actually support me. We didn't invite Robert or Eleanor. We didn't invite Samuel. And we don't want them to know. Good, Margaret said instantly, the steel returning to her voice. Do not let those toxic fools ruin your achievement. Now listen to me carefully. I am logging into my bank account right now. I am wiring Matthew $5,000. You will use that to pay for the venue, the best food in town, and top-shelf liquor. You will not spend a dime of your own money. Grandma, no, you don't have to do that. I am an 80-year-old woman, Joshua. Do not argue with me, she interrupted fiercely. Consider it your graduation gift. And as for your parents, I am going to stay completely silent. I am not going to say a word to Robert or Eleanor. I want to sit back and watch exactly how this plays out when they realize the massive mistake they've made. Enjoy your party, my boy. I am so proud of you. She hung up. I stared at the phone, entirely stunned. Matthew let out a loud whoop of triumph, pumping his fist in the air. We had the matriarch's blessing and her bankroll. We were unstoppable. Friday night, the eve of the party. I stood in my bedroom, staring at the navy blue suit hanging on my closet door. It was tailored, sharp, and expensive, a gift to myself from my first big bonus at the firm. I traced the lapel with my fingers. For 24 years, I had navigated the storm of my family's favoritism by keeping my head down and making myself as small as possible. I had believed that if I just didn't cause waves, maybe they would eventually love me equally. Tomorrow I was done being small. Tomorrow, I was stepping directly into the eye of the storm, and I was going to let it rage around me. Saturday evening arrived, bringing with it a cool breeze and a sky painted in shades of twilight purple. I walked into the downtown venue at 5:30 p.m., and my breath caught in my throat. Matthew had completely transformed the space. Elegant cocktail tables draped in black linen were scattered around the room. A massive grazing table filled with artisanal cheeses, cured meats, and fresh fruit stretched across the far wall. But the centerpiece was the banner hanging right at the entrance. It was sleek, modern, and written in bold gold lettering. Joshua Carter, Master of Science in Engineering and Master of Business Administration. Earned in silence. Celebrated in style. At exactly 6 p.m., the doors opened, and the people who actually mattered began to arrive. My Aunt Sarah was the first through the door. The moment she saw me standing there in my navy suit, she burst into tears. She practically ran across the room and wrapped her arms around my neck in a crushing hug. I am so sorry, Joshua, she sobbed into my shoulder. I knew they didn't invite you to Samuel's party. I knew it, and I was too much of a coward to stand up to Eleanor. Can you ever forgive me? You're here now, Aunt Sarah, I said gently, hugging her back. That's all that matters to me. As the evening progressed, the room filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and genuine warmth. My friends from undergrad swapped embarrassing stories about my study habits. My colleagues from the firm toasted to my insane work ethic. Even Dr. Harrison showed up, wearing a tweed jacket and a wide smile. Around 8 p.m., Matthew tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, calling for silence. The room quieted down, turning toward him. Everyone, Matthew projected his voice across the room. We are here tonight to celebrate a man who defines resilience. Joshua didn't ask for a handout. He didn't ask for attention. He worked a grueling full-time job, paid his own way, and conquered a dual master's program that would break most people. He did it quietly, but tonight, we are making some noise. The room erupted in cheers. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, raising his glass. I have supervised hundreds of graduate students in my career, Dr. Harrison said, his authoritative voice carrying easily. Joshua Carter is, without a doubt, one of the most brilliant analytical minds I have ever had the pleasure of teaching. His research is going to change industry standards. To Joshua, the crowd echoed. Matthew grabbed my shoulder and pulled me over to the entrance, right underneath the massive gold banner. He rallied Aunt Sarah, my friends, and my colleagues to squeeze into the frame. "Smile, Josh," Matthew yelled, holding up his phone. Click. I watched as Matthew immediately opened his Instagram. He attached the photo, tagged my account, and typed the caption. "Celebrating real, hard-earned achievements tonight. Massive congratulations to my cousin Joshua on his incredible dual master's degrees. You are an absolute legend. Hashtag earned not given hashtag the real MVP." He hit post. The digital bomb was planted. But I had no idea that an even bigger bomb was waiting to detonate the next morning. Sunday morning. I woke up at 9 a.m. in my apartment, my head slightly pounding from the champagne, but my spirit feeling lighter than it had in my entire life. I reached for my phone on the nightstand to check the time. My screen was a chaotic wall of notifications. 47 missed calls. 112 unread text messages. 14 voicemails. My stomach dropped for a fraction of a second, instinctual panic setting in. I unlocked the phone. The messages were a tidal wave from my parents, Samuel, and relatives who hadn't been at the party. But amidst the frantic texts from my mother, there was an email from Dr. Harrison. The subject line read, "Check the front page of the Business Journal." I sat bolt upright, grabbed my laptop, and navigated to the local business news website. There it was, right at the very top of the homepage. A massive headline staring back at me. Local analysts' groundbreaking AI research poised to revolutionize supply chain economics. Right beneath the headline was a high-resolution photo of me, standing in front of my presentation slides during my thesis defense, looking sharp, focused, and completely in command. The article detailed my dual degrees, my current role at the engineering firm, and quoted Dr. Harrison praising my genius-level analytical frameworks. It wasn't just on Matthew's Instagram. It was public news. The entire city, including every single person who had attended Samuel's party, now knew exactly what I had been doing while my family was busy ignoring me. I picked up my phone and opened my voicemails. I tapped the first one from my father, Robert. "Joshua, what the hell is this?" Robert's voice roared through the speaker, vibrating with sheer, unadulterated fury. "I am getting calls from the guys at the golf club asking why I didn't tell them my son was a genius featured in the paper. Why the hell didn't you invite us to your graduation party? Matthew's post is making us look like terrible parents. You are selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful. You owe us an apology immediately." I deleted it. Next voicemail. It was my mother. "Joshua, please, pick up the phone." Eleanor's voice was weak, gasping, and frantic. "Your father had to rush me to the emergency room. I saw the newspaper. I saw Matthew's post. I thought I was having a heart attack, Joshua. My chest. How could you humiliate me like this? How could you exclude your own mother? Call me back." Spoiler alert. It wasn't a heart attack. It was a panic attack induced by the sudden, terrifying realization that her perfect public image was completely shattered. Just as the voicemail ended, my phone started vibrating in my hand. Incoming call, Mom. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the anger evaporate, leaving behind only icy resolve. I pressed answer and brought the phone to my ear. "Joshua!" She practically screamed, sobbing hysterically. "How could you do this to us? How could you let us find out about your degrees from a newspaper? Why would you throw a party and not invite your own family? You made us look like monsters to the entire town." I let her cry. I let her hyperventilate into the receiver for a full 30 seconds. I didn't interrupt. I just listened to the sound of her narrative collapsing. When she finally paused to take a ragged breath, I spoke. My voice was calm, quiet, and completely devoid of emotion. "Do you remember our phone call 3 weeks ago, Mom?" I asked. What does that have to do with anything?" I am in the hospital, she deflected wildly. I called you, asking why I wasn't invited to Samuel's party. Do you remember exactly what you told me? I pressed, my voice hardening just a fraction. Silence on the other end. She remembered. I knew she remembered. You told me that you didn't want me stealing his moment. I repeated her words slowly, letting them hang in the air. You said I needed to let Samuel shine without me casting a shadow. You said my presence was a distraction. Joshua, I didn't mean it like that. I was just... So, I took your advice, Mom. I cut her off smoothly. I made absolute sure that I didn't steal Samuel's moment. And I made sure that you couldn't steal mine. You got exactly what you asked for. A graduation party without me. You are punishing us. You are tearing this family apart, she wailed, her voice reaching a shrill crescendo. No, Mom, I'm not tearing anything apart. I just stopped pretending we were a family in the first place. I didn't wait for her to respond. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hit the red end call button. De la koen kak the doi tatsie, kai tua koi kung de lay lai duak win kim so kuak doi min. Kam on ban de kien and kung tua den day. Ban that tuet voi. Lay jup toi like video va ben luan so one ben dui. De toi beat ban de dong han kung toi toi day. Junai kong chi jup nu nuoi han tim thay ka chuyen nai. Ma kan cho toi beat rang and hung tre niam qua toi ko wai nia voi ai du. Suung ho qua ben la dong luk lan not de toi tip tiu si chia se and hung fan kan lai qua han trin nai. The immediate aftermath of dropping that verbal bomb on my mother was chaotic, but strangely entirely detached. I sat in my apartment, watching the text messages flood in, feeling like a scientist observing an experiment through thick safety glass. My brother, Samuel, was the first to go on the offensive. A string of rapid-fire texts lit up my screen. Samuel, you absolute psycho. Are you happy now? You completely ruined the buzz from my graduation. Samuel, Mom is having a meltdown because of you. You purposely waited to release that article to upstage me. Samuel, nobody even cares about your nerdy research anyway. You're just desperate for attention. You're pathetic. I read the texts, a wry smile touching my lips. Samuel wasn't angry that I had been excluded. He was angry that my achievement, which was quantitatively and qualitatively harder to earn than his standard business degree, had publicly eclipsed his. He was suffering from the sudden, jarring loss of his status as the golden child in the eyes of our extended network. I didn't type a single word in response. I swiped left on his contact and hit block. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Uncle David. The same Uncle David who had sat next to me at Christmas and allowed Samuel to publicly mock my career. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won out. Hello, Uncle David. Joshua, my boy, Uncle David began, his voice adopting a smooth, conciliatory tone. He sounded exactly like a sleazy lawyer trying to negotiate a settlement out of court. Listen, things have gotten entirely out of hand here. Your mother is an absolute wreck. Your father is pacing the house, threatening to disown you. They can't disown me, David. I don't take their money, and I don't live in their house, I replied flatly. Now, Joshua, be reasonable, David continued, lowering his voice as if imparting great wisdom. Yes, they made a mistake not inviting you. It was an oversight, but this public stunt you pulled, embarrassing them in the newspaper, that's going too far. You need to be the bigger person here. I need you to drive over to the house, apologize for the public nature of your party, and smooth things over for the sake of family peace. I closed my eyes, shaking my head in disbelief. An oversight? Mom sent a text to the entire family ordering them not to contact me so I wouldn't find out. That's not an oversight. That's a conspiracy. And you went along with it. I am just trying to keep the family together, Joshua, David said, his smooth tone cracking, revealing irritation. No, you're trying to keep the family quiet, I corrected him. You don't care that they hurt me. You only care that the neighbors are gossiping about it. I'm not apologizing for my own success. Do not call me about this again. I hung up and blocked his number, too. The house cleaning had officially begun. I was excising the tumors one by one. Monday morning arrived, and I walked into the engineering firm expecting business as usual. I was wrong. The moment I stepped out of the elevator onto my floor, the entire open-plan office erupted into applause. My colleagues, the ones who had been at the party, had spread the news. A copy of the business journal was pinned to the central bulletin board. I felt my face heat up, a mixture of embarrassment and overwhelming gratitude. Before I could even make it to my desk, my manager intercepted me. "Joshua, Mr. Sterling wants to see you in his office. Right now." Mr. Sterling was the CEO of the firm. I had only spoken to him twice in the entire year I had worked there. My stomach gave a nervous flutter as I walked down the executive hallway and knocked on his heavy glass door. "Come in, Carter," his booming voice called out. I opened the door. Sterling, a formidable man in his 60s, was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk. A copy of the business journal was resting directly in front of him. He looked up, peering at me over his reading glasses. "Sit down, Joshua," he instructed, gesturing to the leather chair opposite him. I sat, keeping my posture rigid. "I read this article over my Sunday coffee," Sterling began, tapping the newspaper with his index finger, "and I found myself very confused. I asked myself, why is one of my junior analysts publishing groundbreaking supply chain predictive models? And why the hell am I reading about it in the news instead of on my own desk?" "Sir, I was completing the research for my academic thesis. I didn't want to presume it was ready for corporate implementation until the academic committee validated it," I explained carefully. Sterling let out a loud, barking laugh. "Validated? Son, this isn't just validated. This is highly marketable. I spent the morning on the phone with our logistics division. We want to run a pilot program using your models on the new Chicago contract." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the speed at which this was happening. "The Chicago contract? Sir, that's our biggest account." "Exactly," Sterling said, leaning forward. "And I don't want a junior analyst running it. Effective immediately, you are receiving a promotion to senior systems architect. You will head the implementation team for this pilot." He slid a manila folder across the desk toward me. "Inside is your new contract. It comes with a massive bump in salary, stock options, and direct reporting line to me. You've proven your worth, Carter. Now I'm paying for it." I opened the folder. The number printed under the salary section was staggering. It was more money than my father made in a year. It was absolute, undeniable financial freedom. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I won't let you down," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I know you won't," he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I walked out of that office feeling like I was floating 10 feet off the ground. The universe was shifting. The years of eating dirt, of being minimized, of keeping my head down, it was all finally paying off. I had built my own fortress, and it was impenetrable. I worked late that evening, diving straight into the new Chicago account data. I didn't leave the office until past 7:30 p.m. I drove home, ordered a massive pizza just for myself, and collapsed onto my couch, staring at the ceiling with a smile plastered across my face. The peace, however, was about to be interrupted. At exactly 8:15 p.m., a sharp, heavy knock echoed through my apartment. I frowned, pausing the TV. I wasn't expecting Matthew, and the delivery guy usually texted. I walked over to the door and peered through the peephole. My breath hitched. Standing in the dimly lit hallway were my parents, Robert and Eleanor. They didn't look like the proud, glowing parents from Samuel's graduation photo. My father's face was drawn, his shoulders slumped in his wrinkled coat. My mother looked 10 years older, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, clutching her designer purse to her chest like a shield. They had lost control of the narrative. They had lost the support of the extended family thanks to Grandma Margaret's impending wrath. And now they had come to my door. The storm hadn't subsided completely. It had just moved from the public arena right to my front doorstep. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled the door open. I stood in the doorway of my apartment, my hand resting heavily on the brass doorknob. The hallway lighting cast long, harsh shadows across my parents' faces. Robert, my father, a man who had spent his entire life projecting an aura of absolute authority and unshakable confidence, looked entirely diminished. His shoulders, usually pulled back in a posture of superiority, were slumped forward. Eleanor, my mother, looked even worse. The immaculate country club facade was completely gone. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her hair lacked its usual perfect blowout, and she clutched her expensive leather purse to her chest as if it were a shield against the incoming storm. For a long moment, nobody said a word. The silence stretching between us was heavy, suffocating, and thick with the weight of 24 years of unspoken resentment. Joshua, my father finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically gravelly. He cleared his throat, trying to summon back his usual booming cadence, but it failed him. Can we come in? We need to talk to you. I looked at them. I felt a strange, chilling sense of detachment. A year ago, a month ago, even a week ago, I would have craved this moment. I would have moved aside instantly, desperate for any scrap of their attention or validation. But standing there now, bolstered by the absolute certainty of my own worth, I just felt exhausted. I stepped back and pulled the door open wider. Make it quick. They walked into my living room, looking around nervously as if they had entered a stranger's home. They had only been to this apartment twice in the 3 years I had lived here, and both times they had complained about the neighborhood and the lack of covered parking. I didn't offer them a drink. I didn't ask them to sit down. I simply crossed my arms over my chest and leaned against the kitchen counter, waiting. My mother broke first. She took a step toward me, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. Joshua, please, you have to understand how terrible this has been for us. The phone has been ringing off the hook all day. The neighbors, the people from the club, your Aunt Sarah. Everyone saw that article. Everyone saw Matthew's post. They are looking at us like we are monsters. It feels like a funeral in our house right now. I didn't blink. You are upset because of how it makes you look to the neighbors. You aren't upset about what you actually did to me. That is not true, my father interjected, stepping forward to stand beside my mother. He puffed out his chest, attempting to regain control of the room. We are your parents, Joshua. We love you. We are shocked. We didn't understand how serious you were about this degree program. If you had just communicated with us better, if you had told us it was this important, we would have been there. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh that echoed off the apartment walls. Communicated with you better? Dad, are you actually hearing yourself right now? I told you I was accepted into the program 2 years ago at the dinner table. Do you remember what you said? Robert shifted his weight uncomfortably. I don't recall exactly. I do, I fired back, my voice rising just enough to cut through the quiet room. You told me I was wasting money on degrees nobody cared about. You told me real life was about making money, not reading textbooks. 6 months later, I asked you to read the introductory chapter of my first major research paper. You told me you couldn't because you had a golf tournament and it wasn't your field anyway. I communicated perfectly. You just chose not to listen. My mother twisted the strap of her purse, her knuckles turning white. You always made things look so easy, Joshua. You never asked for help. Samuel needed us. He struggled with his classes. He needed encouragement. We just thought you were fine on your own. You didn't think I was fine, Mom. You just didn't want to deal with me? I stated, staring directly into her tear-filled eyes. When I got promoted at the firm last year, I called to tell you. I was proud. I worked 80-hour weeks for that promotion. And you told me the company was probably just filling a diversity quota. You actively minimized every single thing I achieved so that Samuel could remain the golden child. We never played favorites. My father raised his voice, his face flushing red. Stop lying. I snapped, the sudden volume making my mother flinch. You treated the affection in our family like a bitter custody battle where Samuel won full rights to your love and I got weekend visitation. And the graduation party was the final proof. You didn't just forget me. Mom sent a text to the entire extended family instructing them not to speak to me. You systematically isolated me so I wouldn't ruin his pictures. Eleanor let out a sharp sob, covering her mouth with her hand. I was just trying to protect his day. Samuel has anxiety, Joshua. He feels intimidated by you. That is not my problem, I said coldly. And frankly, after the voicemails he left me this morning, calling me a pathetic attention seeker, I don't care about his anxiety. You came here tonight because Grandma Margaret threatened you, didn't she? Robert's jaw clenched. The mention of his mother was the undeniable kill shot. He looked away, staring at the floorboards. She called us. My father admitted, his voice barely a whisper. She is furious. She threatened to cut me entirely out of the inheritance if I didn't march over here and fix this immediately. She said she is completely rewriting the trust. I shook my head, a bitter smile touching my lips. So that's what this is. You aren't here for me. You're here for Grandma's money. You're here to save your reputation at the country club. No, Joshua, please, my mother cried out, reaching a hand toward me. We're done here, I said, pointing toward the door. I appreciate the visit, but an apology forced by the threat of losing an inheritance isn't an apology. It's a transaction, and I'm not buying it. Get out of my apartment. My father opened his mouth to argue, but the look in my eyes stopped him cold. He swallowed hard, placed a trembling hand on my mother's back, and guided her toward the door. They walked out into the hallway, completely broken, the door clicking shut solidly behind them. I locked the deadbolt. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it down. I expected to feel sad. I expected the familiar, heavy ache in my chest that always followed a fight with my parents. But there was nothing, just a vast, quiet, incredibly liberating emptiness. The weeks rolled by, leading into November. The air grew crisp and biting, the leaves turning brilliant shades of orange and red. I threw myself into my new role as senior systems architect at the firm. I was leading a team of 5 people, implementing the predictive models from my thesis into the massive Chicago logistics contract. My new salary allowed me to move out of the cramped apartment and into a beautiful, spacious loft downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. I was thriving. Thanksgiving approached, a holiday that historically filled me with dread. Usually, it meant sitting at the end of my parents' massive dining table, listening to Samuel brag about his entry-level marketing job while my mother fawned over him and my father poured him premium scotch. This year, I didn't even get an invitation, and I didn't want one. Instead, I hosted my own Thanksgiving. Matthew, Aunt Sarah, Dr. Harrison, and a few close friends from the firm came over to my new loft. We cooked a massive turkey, opened several bottles of expensive wine, and spent the entire afternoon laughing until our sides hurt. There was no tension. There was no walking on eggshells. It was pure, unadulterated joy. Around 5 p.m., while we were cutting into a pumpkin pie, Matthew's phone buzzed violently on the kitchen island. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and his eyes widened to the size of saucers. "Oh my God," Matthew whispered, a massive grin spreading across his face. He looked up at his mother, Aunt Sarah, and then at me. "It's a text from Uncle David. He's at the main family dinner at your parents' house." Aunt Sarah gasped, putting her hand over her mouth. What happened? Did Eleanor burn the turkey? Worse, Matthew chuckled darkly. Grandma Margaret showed up. My jaw dropped. Grandma Margaret never traveled for Thanksgiving. She hated the cold weather. "Read it, Matt. Now," I demanded. Matthew cleared his throat and began reading Uncle David's frantic text message aloud to my living room. Absolute disaster. Margaret flew in unannounced. She sat at the head of the table. Before Robert could even carve the turkey, she stood up and demanded silence. She looked right at Eleanor and said, "I hope you enjoy this meal, Eleanor, because it's the last one I will ever eat under your roof." Then she looked at Samuel and told him he was a spoiled, mediocre brat who couldn't hold a candle to his brother's intellect. She told Robert that unless he underwent serious therapy to figure out his catastrophic failures as a father, she was leaving every single penny of the family estate to charity. Eleanor started hyperventilating. Samuel stormed out of the house. The tension is so thick in here it feels like Robert and Eleanor are on the verge of a divorce. Send help. The loft erupted into roaring laughter. Aunt Sarah had tears streaming down her face, clutching her stomach. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling, feeling a profound sense of cosmic justice. Grandma Margaret had delivered the ultimate reckoning, right over the cranberry sauce. But Samuel, true to his nature, couldn't just take the loss and walk away. He had to be the victim. He had to control the narrative. Later that evening, long after my guests had gone home and I was cleaning up the kitchen, Matthew sent me a link. It was a post on LinkedIn. Samuel had taken to the professional networking site to air his grievances, hoping to farm sympathy from the internet. I clicked the link. It was a long, rambling post, complete with a somber black and white selfie of Samuel looking distressed. The post read, "It breaks my heart to see what the corporate world has become. Today, hard work, loyalty, and standard business ethics are constantly overshadowed by flashy PR stunts and people willing to buy their way into the spotlight. I recently graduated with my business degree, a moment my family cherished. Unfortunately, some individuals, people very close to me who suffer from severe narcissistic tendencies, decided they couldn't stand not being the center of attention. They used their corporate connections to buy a front-page feature in the local business journal, actively trying to ruin my graduation week. It's a sad day when family members try to destroy each other for a few minutes of hollow fame. Keep grinding, real professionals. Don't let the toxic people dim your light." I read the post twice. He hadn't used my name, but anyone in our hometown or extended network knew exactly who he was talking about. He was accusing me of paying the business journal to publish my thesis to spite him. It was a desperate, pathetic lie from a desperate, pathetic man. For a split second, I felt the old urge to defend myself. I opened the comment box, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could destroy him right here. I could post the email from Dr. Harrison. I could post my transcript. But before I could even type a single letter, I refreshed the page. The comments section was already exploding, and I didn't have to say a word. The very first comment, pinned to the top by sheer engagement, was from Dr. Harrison himself. Dr. Arthur Harrison, PhD Chair of Engineering, State University. Mr. Carter, as the primary academic advisor to your brother, I find this post highly defamatory and entirely devoid of factual accuracy. Joshua did not buy his way into the business journal. His research was selected by the editorial board because his predictive models are mathematically flawless and represent a significant leap forward in supply chain economics. I personally pitched his thesis to the journalists because his brilliance deserved public recognition. I suggest you focus on your entry-level marketing duties rather than publicly showcasing your profound professional jealousy. It is not a good look for a recent graduate." I let out a loud bark of laughter. Dr. Harrison had brought an academic bazooka to a knife fight. But it didn't stop there. Right beneath Dr. Harrison's comment was another heavy hitter. Marcus Sterling, CEO, Sterling Engineering and Consulting. "Young man, I am the CEO of the firm that employs your brother. We just promoted him to senior systems architect and gave him a massive salary increase strictly based on the undeniable merit of the research you are currently trying to discredit. If I ever caught one of my employees posting such a bitter, unprofessional, and libelous rant on a professional networking site, I would terminate their contract before they could pack their desk. Joshua is a spectacular talent. You would do well to take notes from him instead of tearing him down." Following those two devastating blows, my colleagues from the firm flooded the post. They dropped data points. They dropped links to the actual published research. They systematically dismantled Samuel's victim narrative piece by piece, exposing him to his entire professional network as a jealous, bitter liar. I sat back on my couch and watched the engagement numbers climb. 30 minutes later, I refreshed the page one last time. Error. This post has been deleted by the author. Samuel had panicked. He had tried to play the victim on a professional stage, and he had been publicly humiliated by industry titans. His attempt to ruin my reputation had only solidified my credibility and exposed his own toxic nature. I locked my phone, tossed it onto the sofa cushion, and walked over to the massive window looking out over the glittering city skyline. The storm was finally truly over. The chaotic winds of my family's dysfunction had blown themselves out, leaving me standing tall, completely untouched. I had broken the cycle. I was free. December arrived, blanketing the city in a thick layer of pristine white snow. The streets were lined with twinkling holiday lights, and the air smelled sharply of pine needles and roasting chestnuts. It was the week before Christmas, and the city was buzzing with frantic, joyful energy. I was walking through the aisles of an upscale grocery store near my new loft, pushing a cart filled with premium ingredients. Matthew and I were hosting a massive holiday dinner for our friends, and I spared absolutely no expense. I had a prime rib roast, expensive imported cheeses, truffles, and several bottles of vintage wine in my cart. My bank account was robust, my career was soaring, and my mind was incredibly peaceful. I turned the corner into the fresh produce section, reaching out to inspect a display of bright red pomegranates. As I looked up, I froze. Standing 10 feet away, examining a bruised apple, was my mother. For a second, my brain couldn't process the image. The Eleanor Carter I knew from my childhood, the towering, immaculate, terrifyingly composed woman who ruled our household with an iron fist, was gone. The woman standing by the apples looked remarkably small. She was wearing a beige winter coat that seemed a size too big for her. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back into a simple, somewhat messy clasp. Her shoulders were hunched, and the deep lines around her mouth and eyes looked far more pronounced than I remembered. She looked like a woman who had spent the last 2 months carrying a crushing, invisible weight. I considered turning my cart around and walking down the bakery aisle. I owed her nothing, but a strange sense of calm washed over me. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. She had no power here. I took a step forward. My cart squeaked slightly on the polished floor. Eleanor looked up. Our eyes met over a massive pile of Honeycrisp apples. Her breath hitched audibly. She dropped the apple she was holding, her hands flying to her mouth. She stood completely paralyzed, staring at me as if I were a ghost materializing in the middle of the grocery store. "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice was entirely neutral. Not angry, not warm, just a simple acknowledgement of her existence. "Joshua," she breathed out, her voice trembling violently. She took a hesitant step toward me, her eyes sweeping over my expensive wool overcoat, my tailored scarf, the undeniable look of health and prosperity radiating from me. You look wonderful. You look so handsome." "Thank you. I'm doing very well," I replied, keeping my hands firmly on the handle of my shopping cart. The silence descended upon us again, broken only by the tinny Christmas music playing through the store's speakers. She looked at the contents of my cart, the prime rib, the expensive wines. Are you hosting Christmas this year?" she asked, her voice desperately fragile, carrying a tiny, pathetic spark of hope. "Yes, Matthew, Aunt Sarah, and a large group of my friends are coming over to my new place. I moved downtown last month." "Oh," she whispered, the spark in her eyes dying instantly. "That sounds lovely. Your father and I. It's just going to be the two of us this year. Samuel is spending the holidays with Emily's family in Florida. And Grandma Margaret. Well, I nodded slowly. I knew that the empire of favoritism she had built had collapsed, leaving her entirely isolated in that massive, quiet house with a husband she was constantly arguing with and a golden child who had fled to Florida the moment things got difficult. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said politely, though I didn't feel an ounce of pity. She reached out, her fingers hovering in the air inches from my arm, but she didn't dare touch me. Her eyes filled with tears, spilling over her eyelashes and tracking down her pale cheeks. "Joshua," she choked out, her voice breaking completely. "I miss you. I miss my son. I wake up every single morning and I replay that phone call in my head. I replay the day of Samuel's graduation. If I could take it back, if I could just go back in time and change it, I would give anything. We are so utterly broken without you. I looked at her tears. For the first 24 years of my life, my mother's tears were a weapon. They were designed to inflict guilt, to force compliance, to make me apologize for things I didn't even do. But looking at her now, crying in the produce section of a grocery store, the weapon was completely useless. The emotional armor I had built was entirely impenetrable. "You can't go back in time, Mom," I said softly. "You made a choice. Every single day of my life, you and Dad made a choice to put Samuel first and push me aside. The graduation party wasn't an accident. It was just the grand finale." "I know," she sobbed quietly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I know we did, and we are paying for it. I need to know one thing." She looked up at me, her eyes searching my face with a desperate, agonizing intensity. "Are you happy, Joshua? Truly happy?" It was the most profound question she had ever asked me. I didn't have to think about the answer. I didn't have to search my soul. The answer was right there, radiating through my bones. I looked at this broken woman. I thought about my brilliant career, my beautiful home, the friends who stood by me, the cousin who fought for me, and the unshakable confidence I had forged in the fires of their rejection. "Yes, Mom," I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. "I am happier than I have ever been in my entire life." Eleanor stared at me. She let out a long, shuddering breath. The finality of my answer struck her with the force of a physical blow. She realized in that exact moment that my happiness was completely, utterly independent of her. I didn't need her love to survive. I didn't need her validation to succeed. I had outgrown the toxic soil she planted me in. She nodded slowly, the fight completely draining out of her body. Her shoulders slumped even further. "That's all I wanted to hear," she whispered. "Merry Christmas, Joshua." "Merry Christmas, Mom." I turned my cart around and walked away. I didn't look back. I navigated through the aisles, paid for my groceries, and walked out into the freezing, exhilarating winter air. As I loaded the bags into the trunk of my car, I paused and looked up at the gray, snowy sky. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. Sometimes, the universe disguises its greatest blessings as devastating rejections. When my family actively conspired to exclude me from that graduation party, they thought they were putting me in my place. They thought they were reminding me that I was secondary, that I was a shadow meant to stand behind my brother's light. But what they actually did was set me free. They gave me the final, undeniable proof I needed to stop waiting for a train that was never going to arrive. They pushed me so far out into the cold that I had no choice but to learn how to build my own fire. The trauma of being the scapegoat, the pain of being the invisible child, it all burned away the night of my own graduation party, replaced by the blazing realization of my own self-worth. Blood does not make a family. Shared DNA does not entitle anyone to a front-row seat to your life, especially if they only use that seat to throw stones at you. Family is an action. It is the people who show up for you when there's nothing in it for them. It's the people who celebrate your victories as loudly as their own. I got into my car, started the engine, and turned the heater on high. The radio was playing a cheerful holiday song. I merged onto the highway, driving toward my beautiful loft, my incredible friends, and a future that belonged entirely to me. I had survived the storm, and the sunrise was absolutely spectacular. Listen to me closely because this is the most important part of this entire video. If you are sitting there right now watching this and you feel like the black sheep of your family, if you constantly feel like you are walking on eggshells, shrinking yourself down, or begging for scraps of affection from people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, I need you to hear this truth. Their inability to love you is a reflection of their own brokenness, not your lack of worth. We are conditioned by society to believe that we must endure endless toxicity simply because it comes from our parents or our siblings. We are told to keep the peace and be the bigger person. But keeping the peace should never require you to declare war on yourself. The psychology of family scapegoating is deeply damaging. It programs you to believe you deserve the poor treatment. But you have the power to break that programming. You have the right to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. The greatest revenge is not anger. The greatest revenge is massive, undeniable success and complete, absolute emotional detachment. I want to hear from you. What is the biggest lesson you are taking away from my story today? Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members to protect your own peace? Tell me your story in the comments below. Or, if this story simply resonated with you and reminded you of your own strength, just drop the word good in the comments so I know you are standing tall with me. Thank you so much for watching, for sharing my journey, and for being part of my true, chosen family here. Keep grinding, keep protecting your peace, and I will see you all in the next video.